First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. Chiles on Friday.
With Adrian Chiles.
Most people I speak to involved in criminal justice tell me the whole system was creaking dangerously before the pandemic hit, and now they say it's reached crisis point. A senior barrister, Chris Dorr QC, has told us that the backlog of cases building up because there are fewer courts in operation could take a decade to clear in some cases, which means, of course, that suspects face longer in prison or on bail, and victims are facing much longer waits to get justice. For both victims and suspects, the agonising wait for the trial, which I'm sure they're all dreading for different reasons, is just getting longer and longer. Over the last week, I've spoken to two women. They said awful stuff. One tells us she was raped. The other, she was a victim of domestic violence. One has to wait until March 2021 for the trial. That's 15 months on from the incident to get a day in court. The other won't see a trial, incredibly, until 2022. So at least 2 years on. As you'll hear from their accounts, they feel their life's on hold. It's made them question whether they should have gone to the police in the first place. Neither woman can be identified, obviously, nor can the alleged perpetrator. So their words are spoken by an actor. We've also removed any details that could jeopardise a future trial. I have to warn you, the details in here are really upsetting. I was certainly upset. First, listen to a woman we're calling Rachel. And as I've said, there are some harrowing details here.
So, in February, I was raped by my ex-boyfriend. We were kind of together at the time. He was living with me, and I was unconscious. I was tied up. He made a video of it. When I woke up, I was tied up. I was quite confused. I asked why I was tied up, and he showed me the video, and I just couldn't believe it. I was in an abusive relationship, but even so, I was so manipulated and caught up in that relationship, I continued with him. I told him that was not okay. This is rape. He made quite a few. He thought it was actually funny, but it was so traumatic for me that my body just shut down. I couldn't think of it. I just wanted to move on from it, so we did. But then, in March, he actually stole from me, and that's when it finally clicked for me that this wasn't a good person. Funny as it is comparing the rape to theft, but when he actually stole from me, I came to the conclusion that I couldn't be with him anymore, that I couldn't have him in my house anymore, so I kicked him out. And by then, I decided the next day to go and report him.
Well, I'm so sorry for what you've had to go through, but you went to the police, and were they sympathetic to you? What did they say?
When I got there, I told them what happened. I was interviewed. I was with the police for about 3 hours, maybe. The next day, an officer called me in the morning asking me to send in the video, which I did. And the very next day, they asked me to come into the police and give a video statement, which was recorded, and there was an arrest warrant for him.
So at this stage, things were moving rather quickly. But what happened then?
He was arrested. They kept him. He was interviewed a day after, and then he was charged with the offence, and they kept him. Arrested, I think, for a month and a half, maybe. And then because of COVID-19, which was... I only found out because I kept looking for the officers to find out what happened on his hearing, whether he was going to plead guilty or not guilty. And then I found out that his lawyer was applying for a bail request. I was very surprised. I didn't even know that was a possibility, that he might be let out. And they did. The judge let him out.
Okay, so, there are so many issues here. Firstly, there's the granting of bail. But at least at that stage, the trial wasn't far away. So the incident was in February. You went to the police in March. When was the trial date originally set for?
They didn't set a trial date. In fact, when he was released, they scheduled a new hearing, like a pre-trial hearing, to set a date for the trial up to August. So I knew then that he'd be out until August. In August, they set the trial to May 2022. On that day, I almost felt like dropping everything, you know, and actually just going to the media and telling them, look, this is happening. I don't care if it damages the case. I was so revolted. I mean, how am I supposed to live? I have a business here which I have to freeze because I have no psychological ability to do anything. I'm scared to leave my house.
So, to be clear, this happened in February. You went to the police in March of 2020. He was released on bail in April, and the trial won't now be until more than 2 years after that. So you potentially got 2 years to live with this.
That was the original date, but on the week before the hearing, I actually wrote a handwritten letter to the judge of the hearing, which granted him bail, and told him, look, I live in fear. And when I did that, I got a response on the same day after the hearing from someone from the Crown Court saying, given the gravity of the case, we're looking for a significant earlier date. And the next day, someone from Witness Care called me to see if I was available in March 2021.
Right, so what is your life like in the interim?
I don't have a life. I don't leave my house. I'm too scared. People don't believe me because they say he can't enter the area you live in. He can't contact you directly, but he's free, he's out. And he's contacted people, he's not scared.
So what advice have you been given by the police? What should you do in this, well, what remains, 6-7 months before the trial?
They gave me the possibility of getting support from counselling, which I've been on a waiting list for more than 2 months, I think. I actually moved apartments, but I'm still in the same area because apparently that's the only place that he can't enter, which in turn means I am the only one who's in prison and he's out everywhere else.
If you could have your time again, would you have still reported it, knowing what you know now?
Well, I've been going back and forth with that in my mind, in moments of weaknesses, which I consider myself a pretty strong person. But in so many times I look at myself and say, I could have been better off not doing that. I would have been, me personally, but my conscience would be horrible. I would not sleep at night because I know what kind of person he is and what he's capable of doing. But I do feel in a way that if I didn't report him, I would not be going through this. And to be honest, this whole process has been worse than the actual rape. At least then I was unconscious, you know, and you know, and now I can't talk to anyone about this. I have to accept that these are the facts of my actual life. I am imprisoned, and I feel like I am being punished for reporting him and doing what was right.
Rachel there, which isn't a real name. It's taken a lot of courage for both of these women to speak up and come on and talk to me. They wanted to highlight what these delays are doing to their lives. Have a listen to a woman we're calling Cassie. Again, there are some horrendous graphic details in this interview. Again, her words are spoken by an actor.
I was in a relationship for over a decade. It was always an abusive relationship, both mentally and physically. At the beginning of this year, it was the last time he beat me. I was sleeping. He woke me up with a hit to the face. So obviously I was quite shocked. He was screaming at me and shouting at me. He had my phone in his hand. He was convinced that I was cheating on him. And I was trying to calm him, and a few more hits came after that, which unfortunately were to the side of my face, so I couldn't really hear much of what he was saying or shouting because I had ringing in my ears. And he threw me around a few times, and after a while I found myself on the bathroom floor. He dragged me by my legs out of the bathroom, out of the ensuite, and I realised he'd got his video camera out his iPhone, and he was recording not so much the attack, but me begging to calm and to stop. Unfortunately, I slept naked that night, so I was unfortunately naked during the moment. I was asking him to stop. He did eventually stop.
How how totally awful. And okay, so you went to the police and reported this.
So it ended at 4 a.m. when he left. After the video, he strangled me and told me I was going to die. The day after, he told me he was going to kill me, and this was the end. The day after, my business partner knew something was wrong and turned up. I told her not to come, but she turned up and took me to A&E, and then I wasn't ready. It's a really complex relationship to be in, and I'm sure you can appreciate it. It's not an easy one to get out of. I was terrified and had him calling me relentlessly, telling me he was going to post this footage and that everyone was going to see me for me and how disgusting I am. And I said, I don't want to go to the police. I finally got the courage to do it a few days later, and he was arrested 4 days after that.
So at that stage, he's under lock and key. And what are you told about how fast the process will move?
So it was quite an urgent case because he threatened to kill me, and also in the days afterwards. They were concerned and they were urgent about it. I was always warned. I knew the process might be months and that it was going to be a harrowing process and a really, really tough one. But no one really promised me anything, but the idea was, the way they taught me through it was that it would maybe take months until the end of the year.
And it got a lot worse than that in terms of a delay.
Yeah, so his first hearing got delayed, which no one told me about. I actually had to call and ask if the hearing had taken place. That's probably protocol, but for me that's outrageous, because considering my whole life, my whole adult life, I have never thought in a million years that I would make it to this moment. I actually thought I would probably be dead before I made it here, said with no exaggeration. And they didn't tell me. And I was like, I literally haven't slept leading up to this day, literally not slept, and no one even thought to tell me it was delayed. So in my head, it's just like that process. You have to work through these processes. Because it is such a terrifying process to have those dates, to have those like moments where you are gonna, okay, this is the next step. This is the next step. I draw myself up a calendar. This is how the process works. Once that bit's over, he does this, this, and this. I do this, this, and that. And that just all went out the window. That got delayed by 2 weeks. It got delayed again 2 more times, his first hearing. All the while, I'm just kind of waiting for this to happen. When he finally did his plea, which was not guilty, they sent me a date for the first court appearance, which was to be in, I believe it was in July. Still don't know the exact date, so I avoid this stuff now. They didn't. No one called, no one messaged, no one emailed. I relentlessly emailed, and I mean relentlessly. I called, I did everything. I even had my mum on it. The only way we found out that I wasn't going to court on the date they had set for me to go to court is because we actually went to speak to the court and said, what is happening with this court case? Am I due to attend this week? And they said, oh no, that's been postponed. And we were like, okay, why has no one told me this? And I mean, even my case officer, honestly, I called and said it had been postponed, and he was like, oh yeah, I did think it was strange that I never got a notification for this one. I mean, I'm literally living my entire life for this day. Honestly, I can't even explain the fear. The fear. The last time I saw this human, he was towering over me, wiping the blood off my face and neck. And I'm now going to stand in front of this human. I've been working to stand in front of this human to hold him accountable. And, you know, whatever the results, to say you did this. You did this. And I have to face him. And I have to see him. And they just didn't even bother telling me. No one even took into consideration that very moment alone. Just the fact you're going to be in the same room as him is the most terrifying thing that you can ever imagine. And literally no one communicated. So after that, 3 days later, after we found out my court case had been delayed, I got another call from, I guess, someone in the CPS. I don't know who it was from. Okay, so we've got your new court date. It's official. It's actually going to be December. Okay. I was thinking it would be August, September. No, December 2021. Sorry, what? I think you've got that wrong. You mean 2020? No, I mean 2021. Okay. I did not know what to say. I mean, in that moment, you're numb. That was enough to deal with. 2 days later, I got another call. Actually, we got that wrong. It's 2022. It's actually the beginning of 2022. Okay. I've got no more words. I've got no more words. Honestly, I couldn't speak. I was just like, I'm numb. I can't feel anything right now. This is literally the worst news that could have been delivered to me. It got worse when my victim support team called, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days after my actual court date was meant to have taken place. How did it go? How was it? No, it didn't go ahead. It got delayed. It got delayed to 2022. And they were like, oh my God, this is crazy. Okay. They then called back after obviously discussing it. Okay, so we're going to be in touch with you obviously in December 2021. So when you delayed my court case till 2022, did I stop becoming a victim? Am I now not a victim until December 2021, a month or two before I have to go to court? So what am I meant to do for the next year and a half? Just sit and wait? Who's looking after me? Who's protecting me? Who's keeping me alive? Who's keeping me functioning? Not that it's their responsibility, not that it's anyone's responsibility, but it's the most overwhelming thing you could ever imagine to be going through this, trying to function, trying to live, trying to go to work, trying to recover, when no one actually, there's just no support.
I can't think of asking this question without sounding completely fatuous, but what is this doing to you? I mean, the stress is just appalling.
Yeah, honestly, if I'm being really, really honest with you, it is crippling. I mean, like, every day is an absolute battle. It truly is. Honestly, there are times when, like, you don't recognize yourself because you feel so broken down and you feel so confused and so broken down and so alone in it all. And you feel crazy. You feel like you're going crazy. It feels so suffocating and so dark, and you feel like you're constantly surrounded by darkness, and it's just sort of impossible. It's so impossible for anyone to know how you're feeling. And that is the case with people who have gone through something similar. No one deals with something in the same way, right? We all deal with things differently. We all feel differently. We all process differently, and that's okay. But it's totally impossible to explain how it feels. It's just suffocating. It's terrifying.
I suppose COVID will be blamed for this, but I think stories like this aren't particularly rare, such is the state of our justice system. So what are your thoughts on that, given what you've been through and presumably many others are going through?
There's going to be lots that's blamed on COVID, and whilst I completely understand we're going through a global pandemic and this will obviously have, a part to play within it, the justice system is so dysfunctional. It constantly feels like it is set up for the defendant, and it never feels like it is set up for the victim. I genuinely feel that. It's crazy. I don't feel like the support is there. I don't feel like the communication is there, and I don't feel like the education is there. The privilege I have is outrageous. Like, I am so lucky that I have friends and family. I've been living with friends, living with family. I've been supported financially by my friends and family. I've been completely and utterly looked after, loved, cradled, accepted, not judged in any form, only ever believed. But honestly, there are times when I completely understand how people go back to their abusers, because to be with them feels safer at times than to not be with them. To be with them feels more secure because it's all you know. Had I not had those support networks, those friends and family who were showing me love and helping me survive this, I would have had to go back to him. I would have had to go back to him I was financially dependent on him at the time for somewhere to live, for somewhere to be, and whilst there are refuges and things like that, there isn't enough. There isn't enough to look after us all, and COVID or not, that's always been the way.
So what about those who don't have this support structure around them?
I don't know how they survive, honestly. I don't know how they survive. They'll be put in a refuge, which will be trauma in itself, absolutely crazy. They will feel alone. They feel hopeless. I can't even fathom what it's like to have children attached to this. I don't know how they survive. I really don't. I like to think of myself as a really, really strong-minded person, and I don't know. I don't know if I would have lived through that.
Well, we asked for a statement from the Ministry of Justice, who are responsible for the court system in England and Wales. They said as follows: in keeping our courts running to a world-leading degree during the pandemic, rape and domestic violence cases have been prioritised due to the immense distress suffered by victims. Our work to keep the justice system running means outstanding magistrates' cases are falling, more hearings are being listed in Crown Courts, and we're making even more rooms available for jury trials. And in an hour we'll hear from the Victims Commissioner, Dame Vera Baird, and from the QC, Chris Dorr. And our thanks for the two women involved there who we've been unable to name or indeed even hear their voices. Our thanks to them for coming forward. If you've been affected by issues raised there, there's a range of organisations and websites offering advice and support. They're on the BBC's Action Line website at bbc.co.uk/Action Line. You can also hear about the organisations by calling for free on 0800 077 077. And just one texting will reflect this later. Delays in the court system are terrible, and experiences you report distressing. Don't forget the family courts, where the delays are at least as bad. This means many children are not seeing their non-resident parent. Although care cases are being prioritised, there are delays here too. We are failing children. We'll come back to this in half an hour. It's just gone 11:30. Also today we've been talking about the criminal justice system, more specifically the length of time it's taking cases to get to court. Because of the pandemic, there are fewer courts in use. It's been suggested in one report it could actually take a decade to catch up with the backlog of cases. An hour ago we heard from two women. One told us she was raped, the other that she was a victim of domestic violence. One has to wait till March 2021, well over a year for her case to be heard in court, assuming it is heard then. The other won't see a trial until 2022. Neither woman can be identified, nor can the alleged perpetrators, so their words are spoken by actors. Just a warning, these interviews are upsetting. There's some quite appalling graphic detail. First, a woman who we're calling Rachel. The man she accused of raping her spent 6 weeks in prison, but was then released on bail.
I only found out because I kept looking for the officers to find out what happened on his hearing, whether he was going to plead guilty or not guilty. And then I found out that his lawyer was applying for a bail request. I was very surprised. I didn't even know that was a possibility, that he might be let out. And they did. The judge let him out. When he was released, they scheduled a new hearing, like a pre-trial hearing, to set a date for the trial up to August. So I knew then that he'd be out until August. In August, they set the trial to May 2022. On that day, I almost felt like dropping everything, you know. I mean, how am I supposed to live? I have a business here which I have to freeze because I have no psychological ability to do anything. I'm scared to leave my house.
So, to be clear, this happened in February. You went to the police in March of 2020. He was released on bail in April, and the trial won't now be until more than 2 years after that. So you potentially got 2 years to live with this.
That was the original date, but on the week before the hearing, I actually wrote a handwritten letter to the judge of the hearing, which granted him bail, and told him, look, I live in fear. And when I did that, I got a response on the same day after the hearing from someone from the Crown Court saying, given the gravity of the case, we're looking for a significant earlier date. And the next day, someone from Witness Care called me to see if I was available in March 2021.
Right, so what is your life like in the interim?
I don't have a life. I don't leave my house. I'm too scared. People don't believe me because they say he can't enter the area you live in. He can't contact you directly, but he's free, he's out. I actually moved apartments, but I'm still in the same area because apparently that's the only place that he can't enter, which in turn means I am the only one who's in prison and he's out everywhere else. But I do feel in a way that if I didn't report him, I would not be going through this. And to be honest, this whole process has been worse than the actual rape. At least then I was unconscious, you know, and I feel like I am being punished for reporting him and doing what was right.
Okay, so that was Rachel, not a real name. Have a listen to a woman we're calling Cassie. This is her account of the delays she's experienced.
His first hearing got delayed, which no one told me about. I actually had to call and ask if the hearing had taken place. I literally haven't slept leading up to this date, literally not slept, and no one even thought to tell me it was delayed. I draw myself up a calendar. This is how the process works. Once that bit's over, he does this, this, and this. I do this, this, and that. And that just all went out the window. That got delayed by 2 weeks. It got delayed again 2 more times, his first hearing. All the while, I'm just kind of waiting for this to happen. When he finally did his plea, which was not guilty, they sent me a date for the first court appearance, which was to be in, I believe it was in July. The only way we found out that I wasn't going to court on the date they had set for me to go to court is because we actually went to speak to the court and said, what is happening with this court case? Am I due to attend this week? And they said, oh no, that's been postponed. I mean, I'm literally living my entire life for this day. Honestly, I can't even explain the fear. The fear. The last time I saw this human, he was towering over me, wiping the blood off my face and neck. And I'm now gonna stand in front of this human. I've been working to stand in front of this human to hold him accountable and, you know, whatever the results, to say, you did this. You did this. And I have to face him and I have to see him. And they just didn't even bother telling me. No one even took into consideration that very moment alone. Just the fact you're going to be in the same room as him is the most terrifying thing that you can ever imagine. And literally no one communicated. So after that, 3 days later, after we found out my court case had been delayed, I got another call from, I guess, someone in the CPS. I don't know who it was from. Okay, so we've got your new court date. It's official. It's actually going to be December. Okay. I was thinking it would be August, September. No, December 2021. Sorry, what? I think you've got that wrong. You mean 2020? No, I mean 2021. Okay. I did not know what to say. I mean, in that moment, you're numb. That was enough to deal with. 2 days later, I got another call. Actually, we got that wrong. It's 2022. It's actually the beginning of 2022. Okay. I've got no more words. I've got no more words. It got worse when my victim support team called, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days after my actual court date was meant to have taken place. How did it go? How was it? No, it didn't go ahead. It got delayed. It got delayed to 2022. And they were like, oh my God, this is crazy. Okay. They then called back after obviously discussing it. Okay, so we're going to be in touch with you obviously in December 2021. So when you delayed my court case till 2022, did I stop becoming a victim? Am I now not a victim until December 2021, a month or two before I have to go to court?
So the story of these two women and their long wait for a trial after some ghastly, a couple of ghastly incidents. These issues were brought to us by the barrister and QC Chris Dorr, who joins us now. How did this come to you, Chris?
They were both absolutely desperate, both of these women, because of the way in which the system was treating them. I mean, the crimes against each of them is beyond anyone's imagination. But then to go into a black hole of the criminal justice system and to be given no support, no help, and just face indefinite delay, they were just desperate. And each of them, through different routes, reached out to me. I advise victims of crime, as well as obviously I act as a defence lawyer in these sorts of cases as well. But the sad state of affairs of the system is that they were driven to find their own lawyer to advise them. They weren't getting the support they needed from the police. They weren't getting the support they needed from the Crown Prosecution Service. And they were just being treated as disposable and dispensable items, basically, by the system. And so they reached out to me, and I intervened in their cases in various different ways, and have tried to give them some advice and support on the process, which really, frankly, they should have been getting from the system itself.
But never mind support, just dates for the trial is pretty fundamental. Yeah. It's pretty page one. Now, those whose job it is to at least keep in touch with them and haven't done so, are they fools, are they knaves, or are they just completely overworked?
The system is completely and utterly broken, and I think you made the point at the top of this story at the 11 o'clock that this is not new. I mean, that COVID is being blamed for everything at the moment, but the truth of the matter is that victims were in this situation before COVID came along. I've known rape cases where victims were waiting a year, 18 months or more to give evidence in a trial, and that was going back 3 or 4 years ago. And the situation, I'm afraid, has got worse under COVID. But what's happened is that these people, who are some of the most vulnerable, some of the most damaged people in our society, have been utterly abandoned by the criminal justice system. They have been left to live lives of misery in a state of limbo for year after year, and that's been happening already. It's just got worse, and no one is doing anything about it.
Well, the Ministry of Justice would sort of contest that. They are saying that there are more cases are being listed in Crown Courts, making more rooms available for jury trials. Rape and domestic violence cases have been prioritised due to the immense distress suffered by victims, and all these efforts are leading to the courts running to a world-leading degree during the pandemic, says the Ministry of Justice.
That is the biggest load of rubbish I have heard from a government department in as long as I can remember. If they really believe that we currently have a world-leading standard of criminal justice in the courtrooms up and down this country, the very, very small number that are actually operating, then they have absolutely lost their minds at the Ministry of Justice. The exact opposite is the state of play. That very, very few courtrooms are operating. Very few of them are operating jury trials successfully, and we are seeing a small number of temporary courtrooms set up in theatres and the like. But what we haven't seen is what's needed, which is a vast influx of money to use empty office buildings, of which there are millions of square feet across the country, to turn them into COVID-safe courtrooms, so that we could start to get some of these victims of crime through their experience in less than a year, less than 2 years. We need to be targeting these cases to be at trial within 4 to 5 months at most. Because the reality is, for the whole of the time these people have to wait, these women have to wait, in particular in this case, have to wait for the trial, they are living a life of hell, daily, 24/7.
Right, just hold that thought. We'll come back to you shortly. I spoke to Dame Vera Baird earlier, the Victims Commissioner, and I asked her how common the stories of these women had told us, how common that is.
Well, I'm afraid they're increasingly common because of the delays caused by the pandemic. But let's be very clear, there was a massive backlog of cases going to the serious court, the Crown Court, before the pandemic ever started, because austerity had closed courts. They'd stopped paying for fee-paid judges, who are extra judges you can bring in when there's a hurry on. So there was a big backlog then, and the backlogs got worse. These delays are, it's shocking that we're talking about 2022. There are two things, I think, though, aren't there, about this. The delay, which is awful, and truly HM Court Service are trying to do their best to open more courts and stuff, but it's the disregard, isn't it, of these victims, which is so hard to grasp. They seem to be a complete afterthought. Nobody looks after them. The cases both have said they had to chase the police for information. Both have said they weren't told about rearrangements of their case. These are cases where somebody, loses sleep for weeks before the day when they're due to give evidence, because they're so profoundly traumatizing. And to go through that and then be told, oh, sorry, we forgot to tell you, it's not until next year. And many, many people are likely to think, can I live my life like this until 2022?
But the police would surely argue, or social services, whoever responsibility it is, that this is just an outcome of austerity maybe as well. They haven't got enough people, they haven't got enough bodies to make all the calls that they need to do. I mean, is it a lack of resource, or is it just carelessness? I can't believe the people involved aren't compassionate.
Oh no, individuals in the criminal justice system, very committed indeed to helping out who they can. But the truth is that there isn't systematic support of victims. They are in particular kinds. So the two women whose cases you've been looking at, one probably should have had an independent sexual violence advisor, and the other should have had an independent domestic violence advisor. And maybe they did. They're people who will give a lot of support to an individual and can sustain them. They're not part of the court setup, but they can go with them to court. But they just help them with all the problems that follow from having their offence and all the personal problems that they generate too. But the court system itself doesn't really give that much priority to victims. They are not systematically in the centre of things in the way that they should be and could be without ever damaging defendants' trial rights at all. So I think that there are two things. One is the delay, one is austerity has made it 10 times worse. They are working hard to put that right, but it is this level of disregard that occurs again and again. We this week have published a report. We interviewed online, i.e. on a survey, 491 people who say they've been raped, who engage with the criminal justice system. And out of that, only 14% of the people we spoke to said they thought they could get justice in the system. They were dismissive of the way the Crown Prosecution Service dealt with them, dropping cases and not explaining properly why. Half of them felt the police were supportive, but the other half had bad experiences where they felt they were judged, they were not in the centre of things, they had to chase for information. So I'm afraid, your two cases don't look that different from the others that we interviewed over the summer this year. And, we fight daily to try to get a better deal for victims.
I did wonder whether it was even responsible to put this story out in the sense that it might well put other victims off from coming forward. But then again, maybe that would be the right advice. I don't know. What would you advise a victim?
I wouldn't advise a victim not to come forward. It's very important that we have a functioning criminal justice system. And at its best, our criminal justice system is very, very good indeed. It is fair to defendants, for sure. So I understand your doubt, and it's a difficult line to walk, but it is important to bring change, and this kind of understanding can help to bring change. My message to victims is always, look, you have this person, victims commissioner, there are other people fighting the corner for victims, trying to make things better. We are in there, we can only make it better, and so please do report, just do go, do complain, stand up for your own right.
In hospitals, we have maximum waiting times for consultations and certain operations. Not everyone thinks they're entirely a good thing, but could there not be something like that in criminal justice? A maximum waiting time?
Yeah, there's a bit of a governor on it. Of course, is custody time limits, which you'll have heard about, which is how long the defendant, if he's in custody, she's in custody, can
That's
be
slightly
kept
different though, isn't it?
It's intended to hurry the process on. It's swift and speedy justice. I've never known a Secretary of State who doesn't say their aim is swift and speedy justice, and it seems to be getting more and more of a fantasy. But that is something of a control in the most serious cases. But of course, they've just legislated to extend that. Now, I do think that there is a need to look at victims and how much they suffer from this disregard, this separate position, and from the massive delays.
It's Dame Vera Baird, the Victims Commissioner. Chris, anything you'd add to what she said?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I think she's on another planet. She just said a number of things. She said that the system is, on the whole, very, very good, and it's fair for defendants. I'm not sure the last time Dame Vera was actually in a criminal court. I know she practiced law some time ago, but the truth of it is that the whole system is deeply unfair, and it is completely catastrophically broken for everybody involved, including defendants. So far as the suggestion that these two women should have had access to a sexual offences advisor and a domestic violence advisor, well, I checked with them when I heard that information. Rachel, the first of your interviewees, was finally assessed for domestic violence, for sexual offences assistance yesterday, so that's 7 months after she went to the police, and is in a queue for potential counselling. Cassie has had nothing at all, other than access to witness support, which is the same witness support service which is available to everybody and largely staffed by volunteers. So it may be that there are one or two cases. I can also tell you this. that I checked another thing, which is it turns out that Rachel wrote to Dame Vera, wrote to the Victims Commissioner, and she received a reply, and I can quote it to you. Dame Vera has considered your communication and offers her sympathies for what is clearly a stressful situation. Sadly, however, in her role as Victims Commissioner, she is prevented by law from championing or intervening in an individual case. And it then goes on to say that she also can't contact any agency on behalf of a victim of crime. So I say this with all due respect. I understand the need for a Victims Commissioner, but the idea that custody time limits are somehow operating to speed things along. Adrian, you rightly observed in the interview, they're not working at all. They've already been extended, and they are being constantly extended in individual cases so that people are in prison for a year or more, or way beyond a year, just awaiting trial. So the picture that's portrayed is idealistic, and I'm afraid just doesn't reflect the experience of either defendants, or in this particular case, the two women who have so bravely spoken to you.
Okay, so I'm mindful of the fact that Dame Vera couldn't come on live, so isn't here now to sort of answer your point. But I mean, Norma is a magistrate who's been in touch, and she's got every compassion for the women involved. But she says, we as a magistrate, we always think victim support and the police do a great job with victims of violent crimes before a trial or completion of the court process, but there isn't really a solution for the victims until someone has been sentenced, or if someone is sentenced. Our system is set up on the basis of innocent until proven guilty, and that's really tough where victims and perpetrators are known to each other. We need to campaign for a better solution so that both sides are supported separately. I mean, I think she's on the same page as you, but sort of using rather more temperate language.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure she is, because the problem is that she's looking at it from a magistrate's perspective, and once again, from someone on the inside who sits in judgment and sits over proceedings, doesn't have the experience of the victim. The two women that you spoke to have told you what it's like for victims. So the idea that a magistrate is saying, well, as far as we can see, that victims get treated very well by the victim support and everything else. Well, you've heard from two women, and they're not unusual. They are typical. You've heard from two women that what in fact they've experienced is being completely let down by the entire system. Yeah. That's the reality.
So I'm bound to ask you briefly. I asked Dame Vera, what would your advice be to a relative of yours, God forbid, who goes through something like this, or if you'd spoken to either of those two women before they'd gone to the police? You know, they're both thinking whether they've done the right thing. What would your advice be to somebody?
Well, I think the answer you got from one of the two women involved was that they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't report such a violent individual who potentially might attack other people. I think people have to examine their own consciences in these situations. They have to examine their own decision making around this. It's not for me to tell anyone whether they're male or female, whatever they've suffered, whether they should or shouldn't go to the police. I think people have to make their own decisions. But the truth of the matter is that if and when they do, and this is the tragic state of affairs in our country, if and when they do, they're likely to face experiences which are very similar to those of the two women you've interviewed.
Okay, cheers, Chris. Thanks very much. That's Chris Dorr, QC. He's got a book just out actually called Justice on Trial, which is really good. Sets out a lot of his ideas and what could be done to make things better. Action Line is bbc.co.uk/Action Line. Then there's a range of organisations and websites on there that can offer you advice and support if you've been affected by any of these issues.